Talk about Jelmer Evers here, who, those of you with, I don't know, maybe slightly longer memories might remember a brilliant book called Flip the System that was put together by our friends JL and Lucy. Well, they only did that because they were given permission by this man you can see on your screen. He wrote the original Flip the System, looking at how we can reorder the society of education to put the teachers back in charge. What if it was the teachers who were telling the politicians what to do and how to do it to make things work best for our kids and our systems? So that was put together by Jelmer, and I've never met him, but now I'm going to reach out and give him a big hug. I don't know if he can give me a hug there.
Can you hear me?
Gorgeous, sir. And I'm going to get out of the way and let you give us your presentation. But just so excited to have you with us. Thank you for coming on. Have a great time.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I'm honored to be. That you asked me to be here. A great company, and I'm really enjoying the talks. So I hope you can see my screen. So what I want to do is talk a little bit about where we are with the crisis and where we are going. For me, I'm quite optimistic at what I see in the classroom, what people are doing, and how they're dealing with it. But like if you go back and step back a little bit and see what's going on around the world, I am quite worried where we're going and what it means for our students and for our colleagues around the world. So I'm trying to, yeah. So the original idea of Flip the System was that we, as educators, would build a system just by collaborating more, building trust, not allowing other people to tell us what to do, but at the same time, we really strive for a high quality profession. And these were some principles that we thought would be sort of like at the core of that sort of like movement, based on trust, professional honor, that we really engage with the purpose of education, not just narrow testing, etc. But as time went by, and especially it was like 8 years ago, things have declined around the world. And for me, if you look at sort of like what we didn't really engage with were these three core issues. I think democracy is under threat, and that is sort of like a really big impact in how we build our public education systems. What we can do as teachers, how we can fight inequality. Freedom and also the issue of power, and that's a very important one, which we really didn't engage with enough, and I think that we should engage with. And a lot of people are uncomfortable with the concept and how we should build that and how we should talk about that. But that's sort of like what I want to touch upon in these couple of minutes. I'm not going to delve into and give you a big history lesson. I'm a history teacher. I can do that, but I won't. But what you've seen during the last 30 or 40 years, that we've sort of like had a paradigm shift, and that it's been going on for a long time. So you had the end of history in the early 90s with the end of the Cold War, sort of the rise of neoliberalism. And what you could see is that we sort of like individualism came to the fore, deregulation, privatization. And in 2008, that sort of was really got a big push with the big crisis. And in the Netherlands, it was devastating for healthcare, for education, for our profession. So austerity measures, and you can see inequality rising on all levels. And there's only so much that education can do and teachers can do. So where we at right now is that people are saying, so this is like an example I read this morning. So we have maybe this crisis, this pandemic will create a better society. And I think that's pretty naive. I think I agree with the premise of where we want to go. But if you look at around the world around us and what's going on, especially in the United States, and that sort of has repercussions for us globally, is that, that there are 20 million people unemployed, and who's getting all the money? That's sort of like the billionaires and the big corporations. And Naomi Klein is, I think, rightly dubbed this sort of like the Green New Deal, where the big tech companies are really influencing and seizing this moment to getting an even bigger piece of the pie, bigger influence, reimagining education, but definitely not in the way that we want it to be. So sort of like, do we want this high-tech, authoritarian dystopia for our students? And then that's definitely like a situation where we can't do our job properly and do what we want to do. And I think why most teachers became teachers and educators. So, and these trends have been going on for a while now. So the pandemic is not changing that; it's only strengthening these trends. And so this privatization. These are some quotes from I think an article like 4 or 5 years ago, where you have this tiered system, and the poorer students, those most in need, will be in a situation which we have right now, which is the sitting behind a screen and not a live teacher, and sort of like a real life teacher is only for those really rich people that can afford it, and that's sort of like the dystopia that they're thinking about. I think it's a dystopian and undemocratic way of thinking about the world and where they want to go, and that moment and that movement has the upper hand, and this pandemic is creating the conditions that they can move into those spaces even more than they have. Also in more like social democratic systems like the Netherlands. Another one is also like the rise of illiberalism. You can see that with the Trump government, Bolsonaro, but also here in the European Union with in Orban in Hungary, etc. And those trends are also increasing. You can see that democracy is really under threat, and we really need to have a close look at what's going on in the United States. In November, I'm quite worried about that. And in Hungary, they've already shut out democracy even more than they have before. And it's already having an impact on the freedom of how we can teach and what we can teach and critical thinking, etc. And what kind of knowledge we can give to our students. So especially there's some really worrying tweaks already in the Hungarian curriculum, for example. So that we need to really take a close look at that and see where this pandemic is leading us. And at the same time, you can also have that sort of like same discussion about inequality, but also how does that inequality come about? So this is like the famous graph of Piketty. And so like inequality is increasing. At the same time, you can plot sort of like another graph where you can see that like union power is decreasing, labor power is decreasing, and capital and inequality is increasing. So those things are all very, very related. And I think we really need to sort of like think about these things. We need to do all the things that people are discussing this today, and do the right things in the classroom, engage with the curriculum, engage with the educational science. But none of that will have any impact whatsoever compared to where our societies are heading. And what teachers used to do, educators, but also broader than sort of like the whole labor movement in the early 20th century and late 19th century, sort of like they built movements where they advocated for public education, for higher standards, free education for all, and those things are disappearing. So, and if we sort of like let that slip away, we're doing a big disservice, of course, to our students, but also to those who went before. So now I think we need to re-engage with that, and I think every educator that's talking about inequality and empowering students needs to engage with this question. Because you can't do what you're saying that you want to do in this kind of system, and that means that you need to engage with this whole political question. So, and then we also need to relearn, and that's a really interesting phenomenon happening. So we really individualized this kind of change. So, like Rosa Parks is really interesting example. So now she's being portrayed as sort of this individual hero who, at a later stage of her life, did this phenomenal act. But she was like an NAACP veteran, and she was a long-time activist in the civil rights movement. And the civil rights movement was a really deliberate, well-organized political movement. And those kind of movements bring about change. Of course, for the labor movement, climate, etc. So if we really want to build those societies and educational systems that we want, then we need to look at how they organized. And it's not about individual heroes. I mean, we need examples, but it's about like this collective efforts that they did. And Rosa Parks was part of collective efforts. And so like the quote that says here, we stripped her of her political substance. And that's been going on for a long time, so that we've equated sort of like change with individual change, and that you as an individual need to do your best. And that's not the message that we need to bring across to our students, and that's not how you will bring about change. There is an individual side to it, but it's part of a really well-connected, organized, deliberate, collective movement. And that's sort of like, I hope, what we can bring about in this from this pandemic. And there have been quite a few examples in the last decade where people, and especially teachers, have sort of like really changed the narrative, like in Chicago. And that's not something that came about, again, like by individual changes. That they really deliberately started to organize and push back and build strategies, thought about it, engage with the classroom. And they actually started to sort of like stop certain really things that we had, privatization, those kind of things, and austerity. And they managed to sort of like push back on that narrative. And that's sort of like why we, I think, need to look for inspiration as well. It's not just about what you do in the classroom, but also what you do outside of the classroom. And for me, that's sort of been sort of like a journey in the last 10 years where we started to write these books and what we actually need to do. And for me, and I've just sort of like entered union leadership because of that as well. I think it's very important. I want to remain in the classroom, but also organize how we can get there and how I can do my job well and how we can be the best for our students. And you need to engage with organizations. You need to be part of those organizations. You need to democratize them as well. And we need to sort of like be the example for our students as well. I talk about these without indoctrinating them, but I do talk about what I do outside of the classroom, and they can be critical of that. But it's also what I do outside of the classroom, which is also an example for my students. So I always like to sort of like leave with sort of inspirational quotes, and this one from Dewey has been sticking with me for like a couple of years now, and I've been really engaging with him as well. And he's a similar like Rosa Parks. We also stripped him of some political substance. John Dewey was one of the founders of the American Federation of Teachers. He was a really radical activist, beside him being a philosopher and also a practitioner. And we've just looked at the practitioner side and the sort of like philosophical side. But we sort of like also stripped out his whole, like, he practiced, his sort of like collective, building up collective power, and we really have brushed that out as well. So it's really interesting. And one of the things he said, and this quote is also really directly linked to his sort of like building up like the union movement as well, is that he really linked this sort of like building power in the workplace, in society, to democracy, and also as a prerequisite for a public education, and also public education being a prerequisite for a thriving democracy. And it's under threats. So that's public education is under threat, and that's democracy under threat is not a coincidence. They're closely linked, and we need to engage with both to push the society in the right direction, and then maybe we can make that sort of like vision in the Guardian article a reality. So I'll leave it at that. Sorry, I don't know if I've been too long, but I thought it was a really important message. So this is what I wanted to bring across, and I really think we can collectively make that change. There's about 65 million teachers worldwide, 32 million of them are organized. So let's do it.
Mm. Am I back on? Oh, he's put me back on. Brilliant. Listen, that was exactly what the profession needs to hear, wasn't it? Right now, I think in Britain, I think probably worldwide, people are slightly forgetting about some of those nonsensical divisions that have been caused by sector division or by pedagogical positionings or by these things which don't make us stronger. And if we can take this moment to actually make common cause with colleagues, you know, the power is only there to be taken, isn't it? I don't see anything to be lost. What's the next step? What do you want? What's the action you want these people watching today to take the next step?
Well, you know, it's big things, and I don't want to discourage people. Like it's so big, you know. So that's sort of like, oh, what are gonna, and then you're getting depressed and you're not engaging anymore. So don't do that. But you're in your school, you're in your classroom, you're interacting with your colleagues, and I've heard so often that then they come up to me and say, well, how do you do change? And I said, well, first of all, start talking to one another. And are you part of an organization that supports you? And are you supporting each other? And that's where these kind of movements starts. And that's what Rosa Parks did. And that's what John Dewey did. They didn't just write books. Or they did a grand act in history. I mean, that was a lifelong engagement from their own sort of like life and workspace. And that's a really small step. It can be pretty frightening as well. I know that. I've been there. But it's also, once you've done it, then you look back and think, hey, why didn't I do this sooner? Yeah. And there is power in the collective. It only takes a small step, and it only takes a certain amount of conversations to have, and then suddenly you are empowered. Your history starts, your horizon starts to expand. You see other people doing this, and that's why these global conversations are so important as well.
So important. Yeah, I think with the Chicago Teachers Union, the bit of the story that doesn't get told enough is how long they built their movement before they were able to take action. I would like to ring the clock back 7 years and start building properly.
Exactly. That started, I think, around 2007 or 2006, and then they sort of like took over, like this new caucus took over power, I think, in 4 years after that. But there's, of course, like a 4-year building up, having these conversations, engaging with the community. That's also a big part of it. Yeah. So they really started to engage parents and students, and it takes a lot of work. It's inspiring, but it's also takes a lot of work, and it will have setbacks. That's what but I want to move people away from the inspirational moments, just the inspirational moment, but also see what's going on behind the scenes for all those inspirational moments. It's a lot of hard work.
It is hard work. Listen, I think we're running a little late.
Yeah, so sorry.
I'll just give you a fist bump and say thank you so much for your time, and I'll stay connected. It's brilliant to meet you.
Thanks for having me on.
And we'll say bye.
Thanks. Good luck, everyone.
Cheers,
mate. Thanks. Jelmer. Thank you very much, Ed. It's really lovely to have you with us. Thank you. Take care.